You're listening to Dirty Feet, a podcast from No More Radio.
Vous écoutez le podcast Dirty Feet sur les ondes de No More Radio.
Hosted by,
animé par
Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
Stay tuned.
We're gonna move you.
This week, we're going to be speaking with Andrew Turner, who is a choreographer and dancer here in Montreal. Andrew Turner started studying dance halfway through a history and philosophy studies. He inexplicably, in his own words, got accepted into the Concordia Dance Department and has completed his degree there. He's choreographed for Tangente a few times already with a duet for One plus Digressions in 2008. And Now I Got Worry in 2010. And this time we're going to be talking about a work that's coming up at Tangente called A Standard of Measure. And in between these presentations at Tangente, you've also performed for O Vertigo as a dancer. You've done a commission for the Ottawa Dance Directive. And generally been active. This production is going to be a quartet with yourself performing along with Caroline Gravel, Simon Xavier Lefebvre, and Jessica Serli. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a real pleasure.
Maybe we can start with the themes of this work. I'm very intrigued by this. There was the Cabaret Gravel not too long ago where you presented an excerpt that ended up, or a starting point for this this concept. And it was about the kilogram and how it's one of the only forms of measurement that isn't based on laws of physics and science. It's actually just kind of made up.
Just an object. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, the kilogram itself, like way back when it was, I think it was first formulated in the 18th century. Like it was the first time that they actually, like before that, there was a pound. There were all these different sort of arbitrary units of measurement. And the kilogram itself was the first time that they tried to sort of relate mass to volume. So it was thought of as like the mass of, like, I think 100 centiliters of water. They came up with a kilogram, and so this sort of like everything's based on like 100 units of something else, and et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is that, so it's this like kind of cylinder that exists in an underground vault in France, and it's just an object that, and because it's an object, objects all, like things change because they exist in the like natural world. So things are always shifting. And so that kilogram prototype was built like a little over 100 years ago. They weighed it about 30 years ago and they found out that it had lost 50 micrograms or so. So yeah, this sort of like set off a huge inquiry for me on just like what is constancy, what is change, why are things always changing, why are we as humans so attached to creating stable identities for things when that's really not actually an available thing? Why do we think of ourselves as stable identities even though we're always changing from day to day? So yeah, that's kind of what started it off.
And so your presentation then, was that an exploration, because you were alone on stage, just in how you were dealing with those ideas, and then did you bring that later to your other dancers?
No, we had actually been working on the quartet itself for a number of weeks, and then we've been in research for like a couple of years now. And I guess the what I presented at the cabaret was like just sort of a condensé, or like it was like the most direct sort of iteration of the idea. Whereas we'd been working in all these sort of abstract ways in the studio, I was like, okay, what is this thing about? How can I create a clear line and it's sort of like I was trying to articulate the ideas for myself, and so it came out in a text and.
Yeah,
Something.
it's basically a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah,
and you're describing what you've just said to us, and while your body's kind of pulling you away from the microphone every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the espresso version.
So, what does research in this realm look like when you're talking about change and weight?
Yeah, well, I became a lot sort of interested in how, okay, if we think of ourselves as sort of stable as individuals, I think of myself as a person, and how I'm sort of constantly producing that identity all the time. I'm like sort of reinforcing the fact that I'm Andrew through repetition and performing myself in a certain way. I started thinking about how that sort of how the production of an identity sort of also at the same time is it's an act of repressing all sorts of other things that I'd like to be doing, or sort of little micro desires that exist in my body all the time. Like I could, my shoulder would love to be shaking right now, but I don't, because I'm talking to you guys, and that's just not what you do. So I started thinking about all these sort of underlying impulses and micro desires and micro narratives that exist in the body that are just like sort of percolating under the surface. And the minute you kind of let them go, like they just go. Like the minute you stop deciding that you want to sit still, you'll kind of start vibrating. I mean, kids do it all the time. So yeah, I started thinking about just ways of articulating or exploring different. We started like looking. There's a lot of Meg Stewart stuff, like looking at movement parasites, like your body is a host, like a movement impulse that enters your body. So just changing around the sort of sense of agency, so that the agency of the movement, so that it becomes less from the top down and more about different. About things emerging from a bit all over the place. This sort of polyvocity or polyvocality of the body. Yeah.
It's more about impulses.
Yeah, impulses and how they play off of each other, how they
in a way,
move with each other.
Not so much about the impulses. In a way, I feel it's more about learning to not restrain those impulses. Could that be a bit sort of the line of thinking?
In a certain sense, except then it becomes weird, because like as soon as you get into the studio, then that's the thing that you're trying to do, and that's what the choreographer is asking you to do. So then it
loses its authenticity, I would guess.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you recreate that?
Through your research, did you look at all at mouvement authentique or those kinds of lines of thinking, authentic movement?
In this particular project, no, we didn't. We did sort of like other sort of long form exercises, but but nothing formalized like mouvement authentique. We'd shake for a while, for a long time, or sort of breathing exercises and stuff like that. But
where, when it comes to sourcing this project, this research, what kind of influences did you use that are more dance-based? Like, were there types of techniques or approaches? You mentioned Meg Stewart as a point of reference a bit for this research. Was there anything else that people could recognize as having been used during the process?
Taking little bits from like workshops I've taken with Benoit Lacham, or I don't know, I was also working with Thea Patterson as a dramaturge, and with Jamie Wright, who came in towards the later half of the process. And I don't know. Yeah, that's not so much influences, but
people who participated in the discourse.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to make sure I credit those two people.
Okay, of course, we should talk about the humor in your work as well, and something that again, going back to this brief example of what happened at Cabaret Gravel. So you give us this explanation of this scientific fact, and then you devolve into a conversation about blacking out, and getting drunk,
right?
And it's kind of this equalizer a little bit for you as a presenter, and then you as a person. And I understand that happens a lot in your work, to kind of like you balance out a bit the intellectual and the accessibility. Is that that's correct?
Yeah, that's a definite thing that I like to do. It's funny for this particular project. Like I'm sort of watching the humor emerge. Like I think I almost came into the project like wanting it to be funny, because my last work had been funny, and I was like, I'm gonna this, and it's funny. You really can't force it. And halfway through the process, it's like, wow, this is a really serious piece. Like there's no funny bits emerging, and it's just now in the last like week or so that things are starting to like loosen up, and yeah, the humor's starting to emerge. I think it's always been just something that I like to make people laugh. I think it's not. I always enjoy laughing at a dance show. I remember that being like one of the first dance shows that I went to. Like just that realization that I was allowed to laugh was so, I don't know, it made a really big impact on me. And I think dance particularly, because it works on so many different levels often at the same time, like it can, when something's funny in a dance show, it can be really funny, like deeply funny, because you're hitting all these different registers. Not that I'm saying that my work necessarily does that, but
there is a capacity for this in dance. Yeah,
which I find really fascinating. Just the sort of like interface between body, mind, whatever, intellect, like, yeah.
It's interesting though, when we talk about humor in dance, and I mean, we could do a whole episode just about that, but one thing that I find nowadays, especially in Montreal scene, is that there is this desired effect when it comes to humor, that people want it to be funny. People care about it being funny.
Right.
And quite often it becomes central to the idea.
Right.
I mean, you look at things like Short and Sweet, and quite often, how do you become memorable in 3 minutes? You make it funny. You make people laugh. But so much so that, and humor is a very thin line to walk on, but you can't force it. You can never force it to be funny, because if you do, it becomes as a plaqué, c'est ça, exactement. I just don't know how to say that in English, but it becomes tacked on, basically.
Yeah.
And with humor, I find that you can't do that, because it loses all of its authenticity. It loses its in the moment approach to humor, that's where it hits the right note, I find, when it really feels like this is the moment where, like, that's why we call it comedic timing, right? It's right in the good moment for it. Using humor like that, do you feel that this was a trap that you became conscious you had to avoid, not to go into this, because you mentioned yourself that you had this desire to make it funny. Did you consciously decided, you know what, no, I need to not fall in this trap? Or do you just feel that eventually it diverged away from humor and then it came back towards it?
I mean, I think I'm sort of in agreement with you. Like, things need to emerge naturally from the process, and there's no point in forcing something, whether it be a joke or, like a love duet or whatever. Like, if it doesn't emerge naturally from the process, then it doesn't have its place there. And I think, like, that's my job as a choreographer, is to sense that. The dancers will sense it if something's natural or not, and so will the public. So I think it's very important to I don't know, to listen to the work itself, and to not go in with an agenda, because the work is going to the work is going to tell you what it is, like what's necessary, what's not. That's another sort of theme in the piece too, like is this sort of interface between like artist and work, and how I became sort of interested in the agency of the work itself, of the material, how it sort of starts to form as you go along, and as it becomes more complex, it starts to have desires, and at a certain point, it's you that's responding to the desires of the piece, and it's no longer you in the driver's seat. It's like it's the thing itself, which is telling you to cut out a section or add another section or whatever. And I think a lot of the work itself of like creating is just sort of honing in on that frequency, like doing whatever work you need to do, whether it's just like sitting on your couch for an hour, like staring off into space, just getting yourself to that frequency where you can sort of talk to the piece and allow it to ask questions of you.
This notion of the artist as creating artifice, because in a way, like you were when you were talking about this weight that was created, because that's thing, it's a social construct. It was created, it was built out of nothing except for an understanding of science,
right.
But it was still a decision that was made, which is basically the same thing we could say about art in general, about creation. Was there for you this relationship of exploring art as a series of decisions, a series of using the tools, like this really crafting part of dance as a creation? Was this part of your process at all? Basically, you equated sort of the creation of a piece to this notion of the weight,
right?
And this object, this value of 1 kilogram, was very much a series of decisions made. It was not something that purely existed. It was something that we made happen using tools, using understandings, using experimentation. Do you feel that this process of creating the value of 1 kilogram is similar to the process of creating a piece of art?
Yeah, we looked a lot at that, actually. We looked a lot at sort of trying to find ways of creating, like ways of relating in the studio ourselves, me to the dancers and the dancers among themselves, in ways that were sort of were resonant with this sort of theme of instability. There's sort of a real interplay between sort of the arbitrary decisions that I make on my part, which is this kind of decision tree, like narrowing down and leading to eventually the piece, and then the understandings that each of the dancers have, and the sort of interplay between all the different understandings, so that the piece is sort of something that exists in the sort of spaces between the dancer's body and between my body. It doesn't exist in any of our bodies. It's not, but it's something that sort of like, it's like this weird cloud or web that is like tenuously held by our bodies. So yeah, then it became a lot, and this was like Thea was helping me out. Thea Patterson, my dramaturge, was helping me out a lot with this, and Jamie Wright as well. Like, just sort of keeping the right amount of sort of liberty for them, versus things that need to happen, I guess. So there needed to be this sort of vague uncertainty, like uncertainty in the piece, which was very frightening to me. Like, especially, God, I have no train of thought here.
Well, it's kind of symbolic of what you're talking about right now. Otherwise it works perfectly.
Yeah. There needed to be this sort of like vague uncertainty, which would help the piece sort of exist. But then at the same time, there's the desire to, I have a very big desire to like create work that public, not quote unquote accessible work, but I do have a big souci, a big concern for how my public will receive the work. So I'm always looking for ways to go way the fuck out somewhere, and then how to bring it back so that it's intelligible.
So you really see yourself as a communicator through dance.
Yeah, very much.
It's interesting because as you were talking about it, this idea came to me of the process of reading a piece by an audience and the process of creating are sort of diametrically opposite. So you use the image of the tree, whereas the creator is gonna start at the tip of the branches, is gonna have just this open field of potential, and is gonna start making decisions that's gonna narrow it down to the root.
Yeah.
For the audience, they start with one very simple idea, one very simple notion, which is what they've read in the program, what they see first on stage.
Right.
And as they see the work, it's going to open up into so many different possibilities of reading. So in a way, it's really like two different directions superposed onto one another. And as a communicator, as someone who wants his message to be read or understood, does that make you crazy? The idea of that the audience might just not get exactly what you're trying to say? Does it bother you? Or how do you deal with the fact, especially with postmodernism, which is basically saying there's no correct way to interpret a meaning? How do you deal with that as an artist, as someone who wants to communicate?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where the text came in the first place. It came out of a frustration with the medium, with not being able to get my point across just through through moving my body around. And I think that was the original sort of motor, was to lock things down and to get and that was very much, you see in my first pieces, there was very much this concern for delivering exactly, this is what you're seeing, this is what this means. It's sort of done in this sort of funny way, but I think as I get sort of more mature or whatever as an artist, I'm realizing that there's this interesting interplay now between what can get locked down and what can't. And those two sort of those two, what would that be? Tracks? Those, whatever, can play off of each other in weird ways, and sort of narrative logic of talking, the linear logic of words on a page, as opposed to this sort of amorphous polyrhythmic logic that happens in the body, becomes really, there are interesting things that happen there.
In a way, when we talk about dance, we had Margie Gillis the other week on the show with us, and one of the things that, she's not the first artist to say that, but she says it in a very beautiful way, I find, is that dance and poetry have something so akin to each other, so much more, that fuses them so much more than something like theater, literature, even painting to some extent are going to have together. And it's that it can be understood on so many levels in so many different ways. And that the way she was saying it is basically it makes them as superior art forms to some extent, not so much like to dismiss everything else, but it just gives such an open meaning to everything that is being created. Do you feel that there is a way for dance to be a clear communicator? Like you've mentioned using words, but do you feel that just through the body, it is a precise enough tool to really communicate something without having to use words, without having to use theatricality or props or anything like that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the body is a communicator with immense precision. It's just that the things that you're communicating are not the same as what happens in words. It's an incredible communicator, which it's something that can really hit several layers of understanding at the same time, and it can resonate on different frequencies. Just the body on stage, just itself, there's so much information there that we as humans react to.
It's an empathetic process too, watching dance.
Yeah, exactly. That's it, because it's not just that the body that's giving is communicating many different things. It's also, that the watcher is receiving on so many different levels. So I think, it's just an amazing art form.
Based on this, I'd like to go back to your first professional quote-unquote piece that you presented. So the first one that was in a professional context, which was a Duet for One.
Yeah.
In which you removed a body. Like there was a presence of a body on stage. Well, there was the presence of two bodies, but one of them was removed from the space.
Yeah.
So it was still there, but mostly through the words of the discourse being presented. And this is something that I find says a lot. This idea of removal of an emptiness that is still being felt. Could you tell us a bit about that piece and how you came to that idea or this concept of removing a physical body without removing its essence or its presence from the stage?
So it's a piece. The original sort of motivator for that piece was very prosaic. Like it just happened. It was while I was at school that I had a duet that I was like supposed to do, and the girl that I was performing with couldn't be there, and so I just did the show without her and explained it to the public, and then it turned out that it really worked, and so there was all these sort of opportunities for comedy, and so I developed it sort of that way, and then it's interesting, all these like hearing you talk about absence and removing a body and all these things. All of those things were not even like they're definitely present in the work, and there are a lot of things that emerged that I'm still sort of understanding from that work, like that I never articulated for myself in any kind of a intelligent way. It was just. But I still I think that looking back on it, I'm like, wow, yeah, I really did exploit these ideas in a good and intelligent way. But there was no, there was no
premeditation in a way. It was born of an accident.
Yeah, I was born of an accident. I didn't have any of the theory yet to back it up. I was just kind of flying blind. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a work that explores loneliness, explores missed connections, and that explores sort of resiliency in the face of solitude.
And now for this new work, Standard of Measure, which is being presented at Tangent this week, there's not that aspect of solitude. There's 4 different performers on stage, yourself included. How did the human relationships evolve in your work since that first piece? Because now you moved away from 1.5 in some way to 4 people on stage. Your previous work before this, Now I Got Worry, also had multiple performers on stage. Was it out of a need for less misconnections and more active human connections on stage? What exactly made you decide to go towards creating pieces for 4 people? I think that the previous work was 4 people too.
For 3.
For 3. Yeah. So your number keeps growing.
Yeah, every year.
Why do you need more people on stage nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, I'm attracted to certain people that I want to work with. That's usually the main motor is just seeing somebody who I love to see perform, who I would like to, somebody who would like to get into the studio with. It's more that than necessarily the idea of creating a quartet or, like creating this or that work. It's more about seeing what these 3 people would look like in the studio, or what they would get up to in the studio together. And it's really quite fascinating. Especially like this group of performers, these 3 incredible performers, Simon, Jess, and Caro, who are just hilarious, all 3 of them, and very intelligent and just brilliant movers. And like I become very interested in the different kinds of sort of alchemy, the different dynamics that happen. Like somebody's in a really bad mood that day, or somebody, we just how work gets made, like through the generative interactions between people and myself. Yeah.
Just slightly off topic, but I was curious about all this dancing that you've done. You've interpreted for a lot of choreographers, including for O Vertigo, and the aesthetics are very different than your own. And I'm curious how that changes your relationship to dance when you're in those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely look at the 2 activities as very, very separate. Like as a choreographer, I like to get into things. I like to think a lot, et cetera, et cetera. But I love to move. My body is like just enjoys moving around. So, I'll take it anywhere I can get it. And, I mean, when I'm dancing for others, it's really just more about that. It's about serving their work, serving their vision, and looking the best that I can. That was a joke.
We're gonna leave it in. Yeah.
Shit, you're gonna leave it in. I mean, definitely you get influenced and affected by everything that you get involved in.
And tagging onto that, your commission for the Ottawa Dance Directive, did that come with different parameters than you would give yourself?
Oh, not at all. No, it was really, I mean, that was just sort of, I think of that as a lucky time for me. I got to work with the 4 incredible dancers of that company. It was sort of a short creation process. I guess we had 6 weeks or so, but just king conditions. They were Yvonne Coutts, the artistic director. Just she gave me carte blanche. She's just like, do what you want to do with these guys, and dancers were like, they've got chops. and again, super intelligent people. Dancers are just generally intelligent people, I find. And it's always a privilege to work with whoever. Yeah.
How is this process, though, not working with your bodies, not working with people that you know and love already, but having to learn to love them through this process?
That is a good question. Yeah, you know, that's it, is you come into the studio and you're meeting some of the dancers for the first time. Others, you know, you might know them, but you barely know them. And yeah, there's sort of an alchemy that has to happen quite quick. You got to just like jump in there and get to know them. And I think there's something very interesting about that, like just getting to know people in the studio, like just through the sort of dialogues that happen there, the laughs that emerge, you know, in that context. I mean, you end up with different kinds of work in that context. It's not a limitation. It leads to different sort of frequencies of work, which is always fun.
Do you feel that it took you on a different path than you would have gone if it was a work with people you knew?
Right.
Do you feel that it took you in a new direction that you might not have gone into if it wasn't for the fact that you were working with strangers at that point?
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely, it took on, it was a much more of a like straight physical piece, I guess, that one, than a more sort of, dialogue-y kind of a piece. And yeah, you just kind of work with what's in front of you. And I had these like 4 dancers who could like rip shit up, you know, and could take it. Am I allowed to swear on it? Will you? Yeah,
oh, please.
Okay. And yeah, like 4 dancers who could really dish it out. So it's like, well, let's do that.
Fuck it. Let's just make them move.
Fuck it. Let's just make a move. Yeah. Cause and they were hungry for it, you know? So yeah, you kind of go with what's in front of you. Also the constricted time frame. I guess we had two weeks of research, like 1 year, and then 4 weeks to create the piece. And that's it. You just make choices differently, and you go. Working fast will also lead to different choices, which can be super exciting too. You have less time to second guess yourself, and you kind of go more automatically, and a lot of interesting things emerge. Yeah, when you're working more automatically or quickly. Yeah.
Before we go, I just want to remind everyone that the piece is called A Standard of Measure, Except Not Really. It's choreographed by Andrew Turner, who's with us right now. If you've been following, I hope so. It will be presented at the Studio Hydro-Québec at the Monument National on Thursday, May 7th, Friday, May 8th, Saturday, May 9th at 7:30 p.m. and on Sunday, May 10th at 4 p.m. Before we go, Andrew, what's next for you? I know that at the moment you're doing your master's degree at UQAM in dance.
Yeah.
What else can we look forward to of yours?
Nothing else. I'm quitting. I quit.
We have a scoop on Dirty Feet right now. Andrew Turner is quitting dance after this piece, so you better go see it right now.
That's it. Sunday after Sunday, I'm out. All
right, well, to everyone who listened to us, thank you so much and peace out.
Peace out, everybody.
The No More Radio Network is an official media partner with the Saint-Ambroise Montreal Fringe Festival. That means Dirty Feet will be bringing you plenty of coverage of the dance at the festival, as per usual. It's coming up this June from the 1st to the 21st. We're going to be recording a couple episodes that is going to be covering people doing dance shows and other movement-related styles. In the past, we've talked to people who are putting on physical theater shows, circus shows, burlesque performances, etc., all as part of the Fringe Festival here in Montreal. So stay tuned and keep an eye out. The programming will be released this week.
Dirty Feet was previously recorded at the Montreal Improv Theatre and is currently recorded out of Mainline Theatre. Thanks, dudes.
Dirty Feet est produit et animé par
Produced and hosted by Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Moret-Robert.
You can find out more about our show at nomoreradio.com, follow us on Twitter at Dirty Dirty Feet, and find us on Facebook at Dirty Feet Podcast.
Vous pouvez écouter tous nos épisodes sur notre site web ou vous pouvez vous abonner également sur iTunes à notre podcast.
Listen to past episodes on website or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes.
While you're there, be sure to give us a rating and or leave a comment to help us spread the word.
Tune in next week for a whole new show.